It was like when they put the steel in my wrist, and the day after, I was like, man, I was hurt. I wasn't taking as many painkillers as I should have. So anyway, I went back, saw them, they took another x-ray, make sure it was done right.
Live on
My wife saw
YouTube.
the x-ray,
Live
she
on
said, "I thought
Facebook.
they were talking a little screw, big old Black & Decker. No wonder it hurts.
Was the audio up?
No,
Supposedly.
I don't
Oh, I
know
don't
audio
know.
on.
Okay.
I
All
might,
right. Just
Audio and video?
I think we got them both going at the same time.
All right, good deal, good deal. Hey, Shabbat Shalom, and welcome back. Somehow, I forgot to or failed to mention that we were going to have a dialogue today, so we are having a dialogue today. That's what we're doing.
Well, you went a little over, so.
Did I? Yeah. Well,
It
and
was
I...
a good history.
Well, and I noticed that if some of you thought, well, he just stopped it right there. We were just kind of, I kept you long enough today on the class, and I can pick up there next week. I stopped, you know, as I said, I spent a lot of time this week in Isaiah 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and it's kind of hard in this teaching style to, usually I can wrap things up, put a bow on it, and there's your class. But when it's in a continuation where you're going to pick up again, it's a little bit tougher. So having said all that, I think I just stopped a little abruptly because I still had notes. And when I realized I'd gone over enough, and I said, well, let me stop it here. And then I just forgot to say we're going to have a dialogue. So here we are. We're in a dialogue about signs and wonders. And the reason I did what I did today is because we're going to be in the prophets extensively, more than you've ever been in the prophets, with me at least, because these texts are so important in understanding the tribes, the subject of the tribes. But what we have to also understand is that some text in the books of the prophets have already been fulfilled, some have not been fulfilled. So if we're looking at things which are historical and not so much things that are prophetic and mixing those up, I think it complicates things, which is why people have such a screwed up eschatology.
If you don't know the history, you don't know the future.
That's right. That's right. And
Yeah,
if
well-
you got to look at it and you have to understand, well, did this already happen? If it already happened, now what a lot of people do is they say, yes, it happened, but it's going to happen again. People talk about a dual fulfillment, if you will. I don't generally ascribe to that. Although history can repeat itself, a lot of these texts, it makes it better if when you're studying the prophets, if you know, oh, this is a historical event. Like we're going to get into Isaiah 36 and 37. That's recounting things that are going on at the time of Hezekiah's reign. We're going to talk about Isaiah 17. You know, that talks about the time period we're in. These, if you take these texts and put them into the future, you're really just adding complexity that doesn't belong in the picture, is what I'm saying. Hopefully that makes sense.
Well, if we wouldn't keep making the same stupid mistakes, history wouldn't repeat itself.
True. In some ways, that's part of the problem. Absolutely. So we're today. The main point was to show. You know, I wanted to back us up just prior to the northern tribes being taken away, because what I wanted to stress is this piece about God informing through the prophets before the event.
Right. So what you actually did this morning was, I noticed that last week we moved the north up.
Yep.
And then, you know, we had to basically, we didn't get any further in the time period, but you just kind of went in and did a little microscope of what's
Exactly.
going on.
Yeah.
You pinned down some history there, which, you know, I learned a few things, like where was Nineveh? I'd never really bothered
Right,
to look.
right.
Nineveh, okay.
And why is it that Jonah, the prophet from the north, goes to Nineveh? Let's say Jonah is 800 BCE.
Yeah.
Why does he go to Nineveh less than 100 years before? But let's just say, you know, and deal with the hearts of the people that are going to conquer his own people.
I like to look at it the way you did. Jehovah sent him to Nineveh. You know,
Yeah.
he didn't really want to go.
Oh, he didn't want to go. Absolutely.
So I mean, why was that done?
Yeah.
And you kind of speculated that it was a time for them to get ready.
Yeah.
To do what they had to do.
Yeah, quite possibly to soften the hearts, because, you know, even when God is distributing justice,
Yeah.
he's got mercy. And even though he says, Lo Ruchama, no mercy, he's still, you know, we'll read as we get into Hosea later, it says that when Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. He talks about teaching his child to walk. And you can't read Isaiah 11 as a parent or a grandparent without having emotions of, you know, I always picture picking up my children, my grandchildren, and nuzzling them and kissing them. And when they get older, you teach them, like you ever take a child and put their feet on your feet and you walk with them holding their hands? This is the image God gives us of his love for Israel. He said he yearns for Ephraim every day. So even though he says no mercy, it's bad, but he's preparing the way, I think, with Jonah going to Nineveh, you know. And all of these things have a place in the historical unfolding that I think people don't understand. Now, another thing that plays in, I've seen comments and I've read plenty on historical and biblical criticism where people assume certain things are later additions, and a lot of people get into that and they really don't know what they're doing. I'm not being hateful when I say that, but they approach these texts, they read a book on academic criticism, they accept everything that the academic says, and yet they don't know the Bible nor the academic criteria, but they just believe it. What we're going to do as we get into this, you know, you've heard of people who say, well, Isaiah, the authentic Isaiah only wrote Isaiah 1 through 39. Right. And then Isaiah 40 and through 66 is either Deutero-Isaiah or second Isaiah. Some scholars say there were a third Isaiah, Trito-Isaiah. Look, a lot of these people miss some underlying concepts that connect these two in ways. Now, look, I'm I'm a student first. I study all these materials. I want people to know that we're going to be getting into text in that latter part of Isaiah, which I think are quite astounding and informative when it comes to the tribes. So don't be too quick to criticize and dismiss certain texts yet. Stick with me.
There's a couple of interesting questions that Timothy brings up. If you look at, is prophecy that history in advance type stuff? And Paul says it can be. And Timothy says, isn't it possible that the prophets lift up visions that may or may not transpire depending on human action? And I think you've
Yeah.
said that before.
Yeah, so there are like three questions in that thing that you just read. So you have, first of all, some of the pronouncements. Like there are things we have to look for in the prophets. When you see Naum Yehovah, Jehovah declares, Ko Amar Yehovah, we're going to look at certain phrases. We're going to look at phrases that say, in those days and at that time. But we're also going to see things recorded in the prophets that are recording historical events of their day. For instance, Isaiah says, and I went into my wife and she conceived and brought forth a child. This, you can, most people don't look at that as prophetic. But in other words, that's a historical point in the life of the prophet. We get a lot of that in Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, so forth and so on. Sometimes these prophetic texts are giving that historical, and then sometimes they're pointing forward to the future. There is this idea that, let's see how he puts it, there is a possibility. In other words, if I take everything written in the prophets and I build my eschatology and include every verse, I've made a mistake. One example is the end of Malachi, where it says that I will send Elijah the prophet, and he will turn the hearts of the children to the fathers and the fathers to the children, lest I smite the earth with a devotion of destruction, a harem. So in other words, it's one or the other. You ever read an interactive book where it says you get to choose the ending? The biblical prophets often give us a couple of options. If this, then this. If this, however, this is the result. And that's what's important as we work through this. So today, I wanted to go back, like you said, Dave, and sort of build back a little bit right before the deportation of the final deportation of the Northern Kingdom, and show that meanwhile, in the north you got Hosea talking, in the south you have Isaiah talking. They both are using their children and their own lives to demonstrate, illustrate, and proclaim what is to come. God does nothing unless he reveals his secret.
Using their names.
That's right.
Whether it actually means that those children are involved in some kind of issue there. or
Yeah.
not, but the names themselves,
Yeah, that's right.
it was important.
That's
It was
right.
enough. It was enough.
Yeah, can you imagine being named No Mercy or
It's
something?
kind of like your
Yeah.
map up here. It's a visual aid.
Yep.
It's an aid.
Yep.
It's something you can remember about. You spoke earlier about how a place and a person, I don't know how you worded it,
Stuck in your memory.
stuck in your memory because of the place and the person. And
Yeah.
so if you look at the person or you remember about the person, you remember the place. Same thing.
Yeah.
It's a visual aid. That's why video is important. Audio
Right.
is great too. Don't
Yeah.
get me wrong, but for somebody to see where Nineveh is,
Right.
is something.
Yep, because it does. It adds an element, a level of understanding.
Helps you to remember too.
That's right. When I can look at a text and I can understand the context. So John and I were talking about this right before while we were eating, actually. And one of the things that I made a statement that something to the effect that misinterpretation takes place when people don't read.
Yep.
But you also have to know what to read. Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
So if I'm reading Isaiah 7, 8, 9, and 10, which is where I started to focus this week, if I just read that, but I didn't know who Retzin was, who the son of Remaliah was, who the king of Assyria is, if I don't know that, and I don't know who Ephraim is, and I don't know if it says in 65 years this is going to happen, if I don't know a beginning point, you see, all of those things, context, chronology, the characters, everything comes together, and if you can put it on the map geographically, now we're getting somewhere. Now the light bulb comes on. So, for instance, I can tell you that right now, just to prepare this class, I'm knee deep in Isaiah 7, 8, 9, 10, Isaiah 17, Isaiah 36, 37, 2 Kings 15, 16, 17, 18, 2 Chronicles 26, 27, 28, 29. Next week I'll add chapter 30. If you were to look at a chart, and they have some nice ones out here, where you say, give me a timeline first. It's important to put it on the timeline, and you go, okay, who's a prophet now? Who's a prophet in the north? Who's a prophet in the south? Who's a king? Who's a king? You start you triangulate, and you get an understanding. But if you don't know that, and you just read the Bible, like if somebody picked up 2 Chronicles, and they just started reading it, they wouldn't be able to do what we're doing here today. That's my point.
I mean, there's a civil war going on, brothers against brothers there. Prophets on both sides. You read it and you don't understand it. That's happening.
Yeah.
You're thinking, what are they doing?
Yep.
You know, who's they talking about here? They're talking about each other.
That's right. I love it, and there are a lot of examples of this. But just this week, while I was studying, let me see if I can find this real quick. I don't know if it's actually what I want to bring up. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. Look at Amos chapter 7, for instance. Because if you imagine you're reading a prophet, let's say I'm reading Amos, and I don't know who is Amos talking to. You know, I might understand he's talking to the court of the king, but if I don't understand that I've got one kingdom in the north, one kingdom in the south, you're going to miss stuff. Yep. You read over it and it doesn't hit you. For instance, I'm going to look at Amos 7, verse 10. Amaziah, the priest of Bethel, sent this message to King Jeroboam of Israel. All right, so we're talking to the north, right? We're in the north. Amos is conspiring against you within the house of Israel. So he's telling Jeroboam, look, this prophet is stirring up the people of the north. The country cannot endure the things he is saying. For Amos has said, Jeroboam shall die by the sword, and Israel will be exiled from its soil. Right? Now look at this. Amaziah also said to Amos, seer, off with you to the land of Judah. Earn your living there and do your prophesying there, but don't you ever prophesy again at Bethel, for it is a king's sanctuary and a royal palace. And then, of course, Amos's famous answer, which I love, he answers Amaziah, I'm not a prophet. I'm not a prophet's son. I was a cattle breeder, and I was tender of sycamore trees, and God told me to come say this, and I'm paraphrasing, and by God, I'm going to say it. So he tells him, this is a beautiful picture of the two kingdoms, the two prophets. Amos is addressing, they tell him, look, take your tail and go prophesy, and don't you come up here with that stuff. And he said, no, I'm sent here. I'm going to say what I have to say. What I want people to do is begin to distinguish who is the prophet, to whom is he speaking, and does it have anything to do with the other group?
That's right.
You know? This is, it kind of sheds light on the subject. I think that's what really helps me to keep things straight.
Okay, so Miriam had a question. Is Is it, prophecy for that particular time? Can it also be in the future for our learning or whatever?
It depends. I mean,
I
most,
think a couple of them, like when we were in Israel, you pointed out that, there was a prophecy, a vision of an old man walking up to the steps, that hardly walk, that sort of thing. There are a few of those, right?
there's a lot. In fact, the example, to your point, that is something that was not happening at that time. Today, I talked about Isaiah 6, 7, 8. That's happening at that time.
Right.
Does it also apply later?
Like
Doesn't appear to
destruction,
be.
like, prophecy is always a warning to Jehovah's people before there's a destruction.
Yeah.
Can we see a destruction coming if we're,
You can. There are general rules that are based in the Torah and kind of
consequences?
consequences that can happen over and over and over. If you do this, this good happens. If you do this, bad happens. But for instance, Zechariah 8, which talks about old men and old women will that at that time people would have said, there's nobody walking in the streets. There's no voice of bride or groom. There's no happiness. You're telling me, Zechariah, that you see little boys and little girls playing in these streets that are destroyed? Men and women walking with such age that they need a stick to walk with? Forget it. It's over. See? That's a prophecy where the prophet sees a vision looking forward. But there are also, I think a lot of times we take historically descriptive things that are told in the prophets and we try to make them
Bend them and bend
Right, in
them.
Put
other
'em in
words,
the
the
future.
prophet's primary job was, he had a job to do for the Creator. I want you to go tell these people, it's like Dad saying, don't make me come down there. You're getting warned
Don't
to
make me
change,
stop this car.
you're getting warned to change your ways or something's gonna happen. So he's going to deliver a message. Look, people, put the idols down, do this, do that, God's not happy with you.
There's consequences.
Yeah.
And when they keep ignoring the prophet, then the next message is, hey, guess what? You guys are gonna get packed off someplace.
Yeah. Now the thing that
Worse.
Or worse, yeah.
the thing that I began to show today, hopefully people are getting this. Judah they didn't come out of the Assyrian invasion without a scratch. So it was close. Like something, when the north is conquered and deported, the south is affected too.
Sure.
And that's why Isaiah, this is why I want people to understand the context. Isaiah said it's going to come up to the neck. Like it's like you're in the water and the water's rising and you're like, oh no, it's coming up. Isaiah said, listen, hold your head up, keep it out of the water. It's going to get scary, but it won't totally take you. And so, but what we have to understand is that Judah was affected too. Remember this Syro-Ephraimite war. Retzin and when they come down and they attack, when Pekah and Retzin come in to make war against Judah, there are 120,000 deaths, it says. There are 200,000 that are taken captive. And then Oded sees this and he says, and I'm paraphrasing, we have enough trouble already coming on us. Get those people back. So they bring them back to Jericho and reunite them and say, y'all take them, all right? But there's a battle waging between these groups, and all these parties are involved. So if you don't understand, like Ahaz, we look at Ahaz, what's he doing? He's got this going on in the north, and he's also got, coming at him from the west, he's got the Philistines, and from the south and the east, he's got the Edomites. He's trapped. He sees no way out, and Isaiah, meanwhile, is saying, breathe deeply. Listen to me. Don't trust. I need you. Ask me for a sign. Ask for a sign, house of David, and I'll give you a sign. And he says, I would never ask for a sign. He goes, no, listen. Don't do this. Don't talk like that to God. You're going to get a sign whether you like it or not. There's a woman, she's conceived, she's going to bring forth a son. Now, I think in context that if you read it in context and you know the history, you know the chronology, it is very likely that the child to whom he refers is Hezekiah. Look, I know when people see Isaiah 9:5 and 9:6, Ki yelad yulad lanu, ben nitan lanu, vayikra shemo, pele yoetzel gibor aviad sar shalom. And they'll call his name, wonderful. People look at that, Isaiah 9:5 and 6, and they go, that's the Messiah. Christians aren't the only ones that do this.
That's correct.
Jewish people, there are discussions about who is this. But in the Talmud, for instance, when they discuss the Messiah, Sanhedrin 98a and b primarily, they start talking about who is the Messiah. And one of the answers is, well, it could be Hezekiah, see? Well, where do they get that out? Why would they say Hezekiah? Well, because we have indication that Hezekiah is like no one before him or since. You know, he was the most godly. So they get into discussions. Is the Messiah going to be one from the living or one from the dead? In other words, is it going to be a resurrected person we know from the past, or will it be a new person, or how do we figure this out? Well, first of all, and we'll get into this more. I've taught on the Messiah, but we'll get into more of these prophecies as we work through, but I want to take some chronology and build to it.
Gotta get our microscope out.
We do.
Gotta look at it.
You got to really look at it. And it helps us. We're not going to use this map every week. We don't need this map every week. But it's helpful, I think, from time to time as we're dealing with this stuff that's going on, to point right here and say, this is where this happens, you know. And I like it. I think it's pretty
Somebody
cool.
tuned in this morning, and I don't remember who they were, and excuse me if I offend anybody, but it was like, they obviously hadn't seen the map yet. Where's Ross at?
Yeah. Yeah. They logged in real early.
I want to know where you were.
It does become very important for us to really break out the scope and look very closely at these things.
So is the intent that there's only one Messiah?
Huh?
Well, I mean, everybody in their
that was-
mind is
I haven't
like
talking
the
about Shakespeare.
Messiah, and that's got to be, everything points to this person that's the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
And I had that thought myself till I watched a conversation, and it was an acting thing, and this Jew was this leader was in prison, and he's talking to this Roman legion commander, and the legion commander asked him about Messiah. He goes, "You got to understand, my people have had lots of Messiahs."
That's right.
Yeah.
So, but most people today don't feel like Moses was a Messiah. I mean, there were Messiah. People came along as the person that saves you at that time.
Well, that's
Anointed person.
yeah. The general
By God.
idea is kind of what you're saying. There's even another element to it is the term, the name, the designation Messiah has been made much of. It's long on speculation, short on evidence. It's, people say, well, this person was a Messiah, this person. Messiah is a term which means to be anointed, rubbed, smeared with oil. We have examples of that. I see Timothy made a comment about the messianic idea evolves. So what we're talking about, though, is this idea stacks over the ages. Like by the time of the Persian period, this idea of Messiah has changed. By the Second Temple period, it's evolved even more. If you go back to the Torah, there's no mention whatsoever of the Messiah that we find in later biblical literature. Well, the only thing we have that relates to Messiah, and I'm just using the term because it's the context to get the context, is the priest. In fact, in Leviticus chapter 4, it's mentioned 4 times. The priest, the anointed one, HaKohen HaMashiach, the anointed priest, it's translated. He's the one. There's no king. The only mention of a king in the Torah is Deuteronomy 17. We'll get into all this. But people make a whole lot of kings and messiahs which is one of the reasons Jonah and I are going to do this show called The Kingdom Chronicles. We're going to jump into that, head first. It's going to be exciting. But what I want to do is I want to look at the monarchy in this series I'm doing now, this monarchy as it relates to the tribes. And as we unfold it and unpack it, I think people will have a better picture of it.
Another important thing you discussed this morning was the fact that of the 10 northern tribes, a remnant basically went down to join Judea.
Yeah, that's right.
That kingdom. So now, where we're standing right now is you have the dispersed 10 tribes, but in the southern tribe, it is remnants of all of them.
That's true.
They're there.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
mean, now even to this day, people claim that that's still,
That's right.
you know.
We have texts that say, remember, a message is going to the north and to the south, that the south will be preserved. They're going to come out of this. The north won't. Some in the north go, I'm going to go down there.
Yeah.
Let's go, honey. Let's bring the kids, and we're moving south. And that's what happens. We have texts that say that. We have other evidence that took place.
Yep.
By majority, the north goes into exile. But you do have a remnant that trickles down and joins with Judah. So Judah is not just Judah. The kingdom of Judah is called after its dominant tribe, just like the kingdom in the north is referred to as Ephraim or Joseph after the dominant tribe and family. So you start seeing designations. Now we're going to chart these out and use the dry erase board as we get in this to make this clearer. I think people will get that. One more point about the Messiah, because all it takes is for somebody to say Messiah and everybody just, oh, Messiah. That's I just want to let people
Is
know.
that capital M or just M?
It's the questions that come up with this is, well, could this be what the Messiah is? Look, let's take it back a step.
Right.
The Bible says very, very little about anyone that they call the Messiah or a Messiah even. What people do, though, and I think Timothy was touching on this earlier, people read about a prophet like Moses and they go, oh, that's the Messiah. It doesn't say it's a Messiah, What about this? A king. There will be a king. Oh, that's the Messiah. It doesn't say there's a Messiah. There's a suffering servant. That's the Messiah. It doesn't say it's a Messiah. There's a king who reigns. In other words, people take these texts. Let me give you an example in what we did today. Isaiah 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Mm-hmm. Isaiah 7 talks about the birth of a child in the 8th century BCE, and people go, that's the Messiah. Okay, and then they define, the Messiah is the one that's going to come into the future. He's going to be a miraculous birth and so forth. This is talking about someone in the 8th century. Now, you get into chapter 9. Now, this one's a little trickier, right? Because it talks about the one who will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Government will be upon his shoulder. There'll be no end to the peace. And all. They go, well, that never happened, so that's the Messiah. Never says Messiah.
It's got to be futuristic.
Well, government will be on his shoulder. That's a different line than the rest of them.
What government we talking about?
Well, no, but I mean, when you're talking about government, he's got the mantle of the government. In other words, if you follow the storyline, the one that's picked is, well, this is obviously the Messiah. He was never in charge of the government. So that the person they're talking about there, the government will be upon his shoulders.
Well, it depends.
That's for that
But it depends,
discussion.
though. It depends because you have, and I'm only using Messiah because other people are using Messiah. But this coming redemptive figure, people try now. Judaism, even through the period of the Dead Sea Scrolls, 150 BCE, 100 BCE, even the community at Qumran, they appear to have believed in a couple of, like a Messiah of Aaron and Israel. You know, it's like you have a priestly, you have a kingly. So Zechariah chapter 6 talks about and this shared responsibility between the both of them. It's a deep subject.
The righteous one.
But I like to establish, first of all, that what people call the Messiah or a Messiah is used a lot less frequently in the text than it is the lips of the people who say they read the text.
Embellishment.
Yeah, people make certain leaps.
So, I'm not being disrespectful, and I get it, okay?
You can be
No,
disrespectful.
no, I'm not gonna be disrespectful, that's not kind.
No, I know.
There are certain things, practices that are done today that were never, ever done to that extent back in the day. In other words, when you read what's supposed to be done at Passover and what's done at Passover today, if you were doing that back then when they were celebrating Passover, they go, where did you people come from? Because over time, humans have a tendency to embellish things
Tradition.
into every part of their life to where, 100, 200, 300 years later, what you're doing that was done way back when is not the same thing anymore.
Right.
One of the biggest concerns of the kingdom of the north from Jeroboam forward is that those people are going to leave and go back to the house of David. It's one of their biggest concerns. Immediately, Jeroboam sets up idolatrous places of worship because he says,
Got some cows going.
yeah, he says, look, I mean, if I don't do something, these people are going to leave and they're going to go south and join Judah, the house of David. They're going to join back up. So they create alternative systems of worship and festivals.
That sounds
Children's ministry.
Yeah,
and I'm trying to
children's
bring this
ministry,
to
that's
modern
right.
time, but it's like, we gotta-
traditional
reward it. We
worship
gotta reward it.
versus contemporary.
Yeah, that's
Rather
right.
it's contemporary.
Yeah.
You don't need to go to Jerusalem. We have a morning service for the young folks, and
then,
so there is a clear separation between the two. But what we're going to do is we're going to begin to look at the prophetic, the historical. Ultimately, the houses of Israel that are currently separated, even in our day. In fact, a lot of them don't even know who they are.
Right.
They're gonna be a reunion, and we'll get to that ultimately. But before we can do that, we have to begin to learn together to identify what texts are talking about future, what has already been fulfilled. If I spend time in texts which already have a historical fulfillment and they're not meant to give me clues about the future, and I'm looking here when I should be looking here, I'm making the system more complex. Yeah, right? I'm looking for things that aren't going to happen and won't never happen.
Convoluted.
Yeah, it becomes very difficult, very difficult.
Unfortunately, you have to keep in mind that God doesn't change. So even if it was something that happened way back in the past and that was the end of it, it still is a shadow, if I'm going to use that word. It's still a shadow of what could happen.
A
What-
principle, you mean, like a
Because
principle?
God doesn't change.
Yeah.
In other words, if this happens, if that happens.
All right, in
As
other
an
words, if
example,
Israel today
for example, we
went
did it
into
with-
major idolatry,
So you-
then you could expect that
Yeah.
the Almighty would come down and
That's
say,
right.
out of the pool, you guys
So-
are gone again.
Out of the pool.
So you're saying that that's reason to look at what's already been fulfilled as a
This is an
learning-
example of how he treats
An example.
Otherwise, we're just doing a
to be
book
learned
club,
from.
you know?
us.
So you have a principle. Here's the principle. If you don't behave,
Yep.
if you commit idolatry, you can't do it here. You're not. This is why I built this a couple of weeks ago in the class. You're not going to do that here. That applies yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Right? That's the principle. We have examples of that in history, and you could even say perhaps in the present day.
Sure.
When I look at the prophets and I read through the prophets, I'm looking at, do I have a context in which to understand this? For instance, again, Isaiah chapter 7 begins. You know, if you look at Isaiah 7, the way it describes it, it puts you just straight on the actual time. In the reign of Achaz, son of Jotam, son of Uzziah, king of Judah, King Rezin of Aram and King Pekah, son of Remaliah, marched against Jerusalem. He's giving us historical data. So I ought to be able to go, okay, let me put my mind around this and think about this. I want to figure out when this happened. Well, I've got certain markers, right? If I look at it and I say, when was the reign of Achaz, the son of Jotam, the son of Uzziah? I mean, I might miss it by a decade. It's 10 or 15 years, but I'm putting you in the ballpark. This is context we can't ignore. And especially when we're talking about the birth of a child, which people tend to point into the future. Look, if I told you, John, ask for a sign from me, and I'm going to prove to you that God's not going to take you out of the picture right now. And you go, I would never ask for a sign. I said, no, give it to me. And you said, okay, give me, you're telling me God's, what is the sign? And I tell you, 700 years from now, there's going to be a baby born. You would say, look, I don't mean to throw a flag here, but 700 years ain't going to help me. Right now, I got Aram, I got Assyria, I got the Philistines coming, I got the Edomites beating on my southeastern.
Right.
Ain't going to make it 700 years. And he goes, what are you talking about? I'm telling you, this woman is pregnant. She's going to have a baby. In 65 years, these groups are gone. Before this child that the woman's pregnant with, before this child is born and knows, not before it's born, before this child knows the difference in good and bad, these two smoking firebrands that are breathing down your neck, they're going to be gone. Achaz could then say, whether he does or not, he could then go, because my help is on the way.
Just a little ways to go.
Now that's the context. Now when you get into Isaiah 8, it's historical. I mean, it's clearly historical. I mean, he's going through, take a pen, write Maher Shalal Hashbaz. He goes in, he gets his wife pregnant. She has a child. Well, we know that's 9 months right there. Right? Things happen the way they happen. It's roughly 9 months unless she's 2 weeks early or 2 weeks late. It's 9 months. It's 40 weeks. He goes in and gets his wife pregnant. She has a baby. God tells him, name the child Maher Shalal Hashbaz. And then he tells him some more things. Look, the enemy from the north is coming. The water's going to get deep, but it's only going to come to the neck. You're not going to drown. See, because he needs this reassurance. And he says, why? Emmanuel. He's still talking about the birth of the child in Isaiah 7. God is with us. This is for a sign for his day. Emmanuel occurs 3 times in the Hebrew, Isaiah 7:14, Isaiah 8:8, Isaiah 8:10. All 3 in the Hebrew look exactly alike. Emmanuel, it's the name of a child. It's for a sign. In the English, though, most translations only say call the child Emmanuel, but then in the other 2 places, Isaiah 8:8, Isaiah 8:10, it says because God is with us. If you don't know the Hebrew, if you're reading the English, you'll never connect Isaiah 8:8 and 8:10 to Isaiah 7:14.
Wow.
It's all one story. And so is, as we work through the chronology and the context, we get into these other
Let me
texts.
ask you for studying purposes, visual. I know that Sylvia Halpert had some wonderful timeline maps or whatever, and I noticed somebody wrote Hebrew Nations Timeline Scroll.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with
We
that
have
one?
we have one in
Okay.
the study, and it is good. Sylvia's put together a great teaching aid which incorporates some of the historical and so forth. You can look at that. You can look in. You can find online. Again, a lot of your study Bibles will have a chart of the rulers, and a lot of study Bibles in the text notes will say an approximate time. 8th century BCE or 740, to give you a
And
date.
visual. I'm more. I want to see like this
Yeah.
map is wonderful, and a lot of people might be like me where,
Yeah,
the visual is real.
I'm
real helpful.
gonna get this just to show
History
you.
instead of mystery. I like that.
That's
What?
a good one.
You get history instead of mystery.
Yeah.
That's what we're.
So Kay, some of you know Kay, she gave me this.
Yeah.
And it's a handy timeline. And what it does is it shows in parallel who are this is a timeline. See the time, again, people debate the dates.
And
but-
what is the name of who publishes that?
This
or-
is called A History of Israel Timeline, a New Inductive Study Bible. This is from Precept Ministries. This is something that she had. There are a lot of these out there. But it's a basic timeline that shows who are the kingdoms during these ages, who are the kings of each period. So I can look, for instance, I'm concerned with a piece of time from, say, 740 up until 722 this week, right? And I want to know who, I took an opportunity today to say, let me paint a picture for you. Who's the king of Assyria? Who's the king of Aram? Who's the king of Judah? Who's the king? And you go, So if you just pick up Isaiah 7 and you read Isaiah 7, 8, 9, and 10,
Man, this is nice.
and you don't know that meanwhile, across the street, I've got this going on. People don't know that they have to read 2 Kings 16 as well as 2 Chronicles 28 to get the full picture. All we see is Isaiah has a dream, a vision in the throne room. That's a timed vision. How do we know? In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and lit. You ought to go, let's see, when did Uzziah die? Because what he's saying has relevance for the time right around the death of Uzziah. Does that make sense? It's like
Yeah,
you're like,
it
I want to.
does.
The only reason I care who Uzziah was or when he died is because I want to. I'm just making this statement to make the point. Because I want to know what's he talking about. There's an example I heard a long time ago. Let's say that we're living 200 years in the future and America is no more. It's been destroyed. God forbid, but it's been destroyed. And we go back and we find, the example is one that has overtures to a Christian culture, but I heard a guy use it one time. It makes sense. And in the dirt and rubble, we're an archaeological team. And I find under some rocks, it's my story, I get to be the guy that finds it. I find a charred document, burned edges, it's real muddy. I have to kind of clean it off, and I hold it up, and it says, "Not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse." And I go, hey, what? And you say, what does that mean, Ron? What does it say?
a mouse?
Well, it says, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. And you go, what is it? I don't know. It's just, I know what it is. It's describing a very quiet
Yes.
time. And then everybody goes, yeah, it's a quiet time. But what if I was familiar with a certain story that says all the
culture,
stockings were
yeah.
hung in the chimney with care? You remember the story? There is a context. A lot of times we read a passage and we don't associate it with these other events and known statements and sayings, and so people might.
People
reality-
automatically put it into a place that's comfortable for them. In other words, this is about
That makes
now or last year or next year, and Part of that, I think, is people have a sense of urgency. We don't live that long. People have a sense of urgency. They want to know before they go on to the great beyond, they want to know the answer. Maybe it's not time for the answer. It's like, how long does it take to walk from where the city of Ramses was to Israel? Certainly not 40 years.
Yeah.
It depends on how many hard-headed people you got that you got to weed out. And when I was at Mount Nebo, they were talking about half of the Jewish population there was killed by poisonous snakes.
Right.
Why is that? Well, the whole time, I mean, that whole time, God's trying to get them to behave themselves, do what they're supposed to. And you've got this whole group of stiff-necked people, which Moses refers to, right? And they just won't come around. So they get across Jordan, they get into Israel, life is good. Then they start doing idols, they start doing this, he sends prophets, don't do that, da-da-da-da. Next thing you know, the 10 tribes are gone.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a question of, he's patient, and you said it before, God's waiting on us to straighten up our act.
Yeah.
And we keep messing up, and
Well, the single greatest event in world history is in front of us, meaning it's not yet happened. And that being the return of all of Israel to the land. This is the one thing, Jeremiah 32, says that God will do with all his heart and soul. He's going to restore all of Israel back to the land, including those that have been scattered to the farthest ends of the earth and lost their identity. That's what God says he's going to do. He's going to do this with all his heart and soul. What's the part of the people is one of the things that we have to discern, but we also have to discern who are these people.
That's right.
I mean, and in order to get there, you got to figure out where are we now in the timeline. And I'm not saying I have all the answers. I don't even know what percentage of the answers I have. But I do believe that the biblical text, if we allow it to do so, can shed light on our questions. But we have to dissect the word, and we have to know how to do it. If I'm studying a period of time in the biblical literature, I want to know everything I can about that period of time. Who was the king? Who were the prophets? What time are we talking? Who were the friends? Who were the foes? Where are we on the chart? Because a lot of people jump in, they want to study prophecy, and they've never really understood the history.
Yeah.
And so I think this is what Sylvia's point is, and I would agree that first you have to understand the history, and by studying any book of the Bible, we develop that good understanding of the history. The theology piece is part of that, but her point is, don't design your theology without understanding the history first. You know, it's not that historically everyone got this right. Her point is for us to establish the historical accuracy and then, you know, in other words, don't look at a text which was fulfilled 8th century BCE and think it's going to be fulfilled late in the
well, to your
game.
point, you know, if we were to go back and be standing there, and we're reading after the fact, so we know the outcome of all of this stuff because we can read it in the text.
Mm-hmm.
But the king doesn't know. He's worried. He's got people coming at him from all directions. I mean, that's the here and now for.
Yeah.
If we were to jump in the Wayback Machine, that's the here and now for him. He doesn't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And this guy comes up and says, "Hey, take a deep breath. You got it covered." And okay.
How's that help me now?
So we read all this stuff in the hopes that it'll give us the knowledge and the wisdom to make the right decisions at the right time, so we're not making the same mistakes that all of our predecessors made for hundreds of years.
Yeah. We've got to look at, we have to discern the difference between, if you were to write every text, you know, in a flowing document and just take a pen and go, Fulfilled, yes or no? Yep, yep. Now, forget, could it be fulfilled again? That's another column. Yeah, do what you want there. But I want to know, is this, or does it say in days to come, this is going to happen, this is going to happen? And there's always a check and balance there. You can say, well, did this happen? If it didn't happen, or could they have perceived that it was happening, and that's the way they described it? In other words, look at it first contextually as this is describing something either happening then, in the very near future, or are they saying it's going to happen in the Olam Haba, as someone pointed out here, in the world to come? And or as the prophets will often say, Ba'akarit hayamim, in the latter days, in days to come. There are phrases that tell us, Daniel is told, take the book, seal it up, this is for many days. You'll be sleeping by the time this comes to pass. Okay, so that's, so he's talking about something in the future, right? Well, do we have other examples of that? Sure. But we also have examples where it says, in this king's day, this happened.
Right.
He was told, I'm going to give you a sign. This woman has a baby, and they're going to call it Emmanuel. And that's the point of today's class, is to get people thinking, look, I'm not even weighing into a theological discussion. I know some people might be offended by my class and think, well, wait a minute, I've interpreted this a different way.
You're leaving out the important part here.
Look, you guys, I'm allowing people that flexibility. You make those decisions, but I have to give you the basis first, the historical point first.
In the classes on the tribes.
Yep.
The content.
This is before some
Context.
people's time. Joe Friday used to say, just the fact, you
Yep.
back in Dragnet, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Ross was doing. He said, this is it. This is the guy who's king. This is what happened. It's all,
Yep.
it's not conjecture. That's what's written.
Yeah, we build on that. And then now, can we support, in other words, if the Bible is our only record of these things, if our Bible is the only record of these things, that's one level of trust. Like you just go, well, I just believe it because it's written in here.
Right.
But if we have contemporary reports, like if we have, and we do, Assyrian records, if we have records that describe deportations from Assyrian kings and chroniclers, that even adds more to the story, doesn't it? A different level of put a check by it. It's a confirmation, if you will. But there are people, a growing number of people, and I find this, people approach critical biblical studies, and I watch this happen a lot. I've got shelves full of books on this. And they begin to say, well, I have a problem with everything but the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. I only accept that. And then some people go, no, I have a problem with everything but the Torah, or I have a problem with... Look, people often, what I'm trying to do is say, let's approach the Tanakh. Let's approach the Hebrew Bible innocent until proven guilty, right? Let's validate it if we can. Do we have archaeological evidence that supports some of these stories? Sure we do. You know how many archaeological proofs, if you will, we have of certain kings of Judah? Google it.
Starting to come up.
You'll be
Well,
impressed.
at one time, everybody thought that, well, not everybody, a lot of the scientific community thought that David was just a mythological figure.
Sure.
Until they proved it archaeologically, and said, oh, well, he did exist.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then that adds validity to what's written down. And so the more archaeological evidence they come, they go,
Yes.
wow, that's pretty telling.
Yeah.
So as time goes on, we're getting more and more weight into the scriptures that is documented archaeologically.
That's right.
And your point about, I saw this on that previous thing about I think it was the Exodus or whatever, when they were talking to the archaeologists in Egypt concerning the Exodus. You picked up that piece of paper and you dust it off, and not even a mouse and all that. Well, what he said kind of struck me, and I, not being an archaeologist or an Egyptologist or any of that stuff, you don't think about this. You think, oh, well, this is what these guys say. It's gospel. Well, that one archaeologist said, you hold up something that you find, this little piece of Egypt from 4,000 years ago, and it says something, and then you've got something over here that you find, something over there, and it's like the dinosaur, they start putting it together and filling in the blanks with their own stuff to make it all work. And that's how, of course, when they first started out years ago, they had the head of
Right. Chicken. Yeah.
the head of a plant eater on the body of a meat eater, you
Right,
know?
right.
And so that's what they're doing with some of the archaeology until they find more of these scraps.
It's definitely
Put
indeed a
in
puzzle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
puzzle. Think about a puzzle. You ever take a box, puzzle comes and it's all broken up, and let's
Or
say
two-
it's
two
100
puzzles
pieces.
mixed together.
Let's say, yeah, you might have a couple, but let's say it's a 500-piece puzzle. All right, and we want to put this together, 500 pieces. You know, one way to do it is to put the outline. You find all the edges.
Yeah.
You put the known pieces in place. That's not even easy
No.
because you have 500 pieces in the box and you got to get the outline. Then you start looking at how does this piece I'm holding, where does it match? Well, there's a concentration of blue here. This piece has the same. I'm going to put it here. Okay. This, my friends, in some ways is like a puzzle box. I would say instead of 500, it's probably 500,000 piece puzzle.
Non-interlocking. Non-interlocking.
But it's
Non-interlocking.
the
Not
way you
saying that.
begin is what do we know? What do we know? What are the edge pieces? Let's get that together. Let's frame up the context. Let's look at everything we can. And it always helps to have a picture in front of us. You know, when you're putting the puzzle together, you put the lid up and you look at the picture. That's what we're doing with these prophecies. I'm not interested in shaking somebody's faith. I'm more interested in ascertaining what the book says. Now, people can disagree with, like there are people who go, well, I love reading the Bible, I just don't believe any of it. There's that group.
Right.
There's some group who study it from an academic standpoint, and they put together materials, and sometimes people read those materials and they're not well grounded, and they don't know the languages, and they can't read the Hebrew, and so they take people's word for it. I would challenge people before you get too far off on the textual critical scholars that you basically just take a deep breath. The water's going to get up to here, right? It's going to get deep. It's going to get scary. But don't give up. Stay with us. Let's work through what do we know? What do we know? What can we ascertain from the text? What do we know from extra biblical materials, archaeology, geography? What can we bring to the story? Because I have met a growing number of people who think they find discrepancies between the prophets and the Torah, and they go, well, I just believe the Torah. Okay, well, look, there have been people from antiquity that did the same. But what if the Torah and the prophets actually come together if you've got the pieces right? Look, I put puzzles together where I thought I had the right piece, and it almost went, but it wasn't quite right.
Okay, well,
You
what
ever
if you
put a
took
puzzle
that,
together with somebody else and they're holding the piece you're looking for?
Yeah,
what if you
that's
took
right.
that puzzle, you had all the pieces, and you had them like in a big bowl, and then you
Oh, yeah.
scattered them around the room, and some of them disappeared under pieces of furniture, and then you're trying to put it together.
Good analogy.
Well, you know,
The great puzzle
I was watching
keepers.
I was watching something yesterday on Akhenaten, the guy that decided they were going to worship a sun god and get rid of all the other gods. Well, when he died and his son Tutankhamun took over, they obliterated as much as they could of his father's history, his life, and everything from Egypt. So that, well, how do you find that? I mean, they actually went in and chiseled out the stone where they had carved everything in about him. So it makes it tough. The Torah, that book, has more conclusive documentation in it that hasn't been lost. And the reason I say that is when they went and found the Dead Sea Scrolls, right?
Yeah.
And they lined it up with the Torah today. What was that you said, Russ? Even the white spaces matched?
Yeah, in some documents, they found some of the white spaces, exactly, yeah.
So you're looking at, these people have been, the scribes had been reproducing it line by line that way for a very, very long time. So. is
Now,
some
we
of
do
it
have
lost?
differences, we do have
Yeah,
differences.
but that's with writers,
Yeah.
that may have said something different.
Like when you look at the Isaiah scroll and they lay the great Isaiah scroll out and you compare that with the Masoretic text, you do see differences. There are orthographic differences, spelling differences, there are other variables. But over and all, the message is consistent. We have enough in this document to determine historical validity. You know, it's like people who didn't believe that there was ever a kingdom of David. I mean, come on. The kingdom of David, scholars said just a few decades ago, if anything, and some minimalists still say this, if anything, Jerusalem is some backwater town. It's just a hillbilly place in the roughly 9th, 10th century BCE. Nothing of it. There's no massive kingdom. Well, then they start discovering, great municipality discoveries that indicate good, strong central government. They begin to find characters that are recorded, Hezekiah, possibly according to some, even Isaiah. We have evidence of Uzziah. We have evidence of various kings from the period. We're going to get into that in our. Did I tell you about the Kingdom Chronicles?
And Tel Dan,
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, even in my, my lifetime, when I was young, and Israel had just been reclaimed. I guess what's the right word?
Established, yeah.
Reestablished.
Mm-hmm.
I was fairly young, and there was decades that had happened before. That was a phenomenal thing. It's something that they talked about. My dad basically can remember before that happened, people were saying it's never going to happen. There's never going to be another land. That can't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then it did happen. So in other words, this story we're trying to follow here is full of signs and wonders.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
That was one of them. The
That's
land
exactly
will be
right.
reestablished. Now we're talking about the people coming back together.
And the question becomes, to that point, David, does the Bible say that was going to happen, that Judah would move in first? And I'm saying, yes, it says that. It goes
does
to
say
that
that.
level of detail. Timothy said the Samaritan Torah is an entirely separate but ancient literary tradition. There's some who hold that the Samaritan Pentateuch, as it's called, the 5 books of Moses, that is more accurate. There's some who argue that, who really haven't really studied together. But it is a different tradition of the Torah. And I'm open to all of those things and study all of those things too, because what I really want to know, what I'm really interested in knowing, and I love that so many of you are good students too, is what we let's not say I, let's say we really want the truth. We want to know. What is the truth? Where do we go if I need another Torah, if I need another tradition, if I need, people are saying, I want to know.
Sumerian tablets. If
Yeah.
we need those, we'll go get them.
Yeah, whatever it is that we need to discern what is true and what is not
We
true.
want to be in the example of the remnant that didn't get dispersed. We want to be on that side.
Yeah.
We want to be able to see and hear with our eyes and see the times and be in the right place.
I'm not a prophet,
No.
nor the son of a prophet.
Right.
But I'm going to tell you, friends, that it's going to get to here.
Yeah.
The study is going to get deep. Not because I'm so qualified to go deep. What I'm saying is it's going to get deep, but it's not so deep that bad's going to come. You might get a little nervous. You might think, well, that's not the way I've ever thought about that text. My job is to say, here's what it says. Here's what we know from the historical context. Would everybody think about this over the next few days if I was unfair in this? I took names from a prophetic text and I put the historical context to it. I want you to answer if that's true or not, because that's what I sought to do. I want to continue to do that. I want to talk about, we read a text, we look in the text for clues, and we build the story up. Like, you know, it never fails that some people will read a story out of context and make certain assumptions. We, collectively, don't want to do that. We want to know everything we can about that situation. So, look, if people hear me say something and contact me and go, hey, Ross, look, you made a mistake here, I'm humble. I want to know. I'd rather know the truth. I'll give you an example that happened 2 weeks ago. I don't know if he's on today, but Ross Bearden was listening. And Ross has been, first of all, he's got the best name. I mean, the guy's got to be. You got to trust a guy named Ross. So, but Ross called me, and a beard, yeah. But he said, look, I know you probably know this, but one thing you didn't bring out is that before the separation, the formal separation of the houses of Israel, these two groups functioned separately already. And I said, that's an excellent point. In other words, Ephraim, the Joseph tribes, are already separate, and that goes way back in Scripture. I'm going to bring that out. It didn't just go, okay, all of you guys go that way. We're now going to call you this. No, you're already that group. But again, his point was, you might want to bring that up. I take feedback all the time because I've always said this. I'm not talking to a bunch of people who just picked up the Bible for the first time. Mark and I have been studying the Bible together for 30-something years. Almost 30 years. Yeah, 30 years.
Flies.
Golly. Man.
Well, going back to the originals,
Yeah.
Joseph and Judah were the two key players in the beginning of the story.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, they were both strong figures in different roles.
Yeah. And we're gonna see that play out throughout the Torah, the prophets, the writings. Look, I really honestly appreciate all the time and energy that all of you put into studying these things out. I see that I'm very blessed in that we have a microphone here, and I get up and I can do this every week. Many of you could do the same thing. So the fact that you take time to spend with us on a Saturday means a lot to me. I appreciate that. Stick with us on this. We're going to go through quite a bit. We're talking about the bulk of biblical literature and the principal points in prophecy. So if we're going to discern this, we've got to, I'm not going to tell people check your brain at the door, but I am going to say guard your heart and make me prove it. Beyond a reasonable doubt. In other words, does the preponderance of evidence support or not support what I'm saying? That's a fair test.
Yeah.
If at any point I say, look, I know it says that, Sherry, but that's not what it means. It really means
go on
this.
with pure speculatism when we might just say, wait a minute.
You need to call me on it.
Right.
So earlier, you didn't deny that you keep cattle in trees, right? So.
That's right. I didn't even say that. That's right. I just said I'm not a... See, I stopped. But the bottom line is we're dealing with heavenly things, but we're people of the dirt. And in God's message, you know, he says, my ways are higher than your ways, my thoughts your thoughts. But yet he communicates to man. Again, the main purpose is he wants that humanity would repent. Ultimately, the plan goes to all the nations of the world. But essential to that is a certain people that he's called. They failed in some regards. They were punished for that. But that job still has to be done. Just like Jonah tried to avoid his responsibility, he still has to do it. So does Israel. So, stay with us. It's going to get deep, up to the neck.
Might get ate by fish.
Yeah. Remember, hold me to this. Go check. You know, I know what study Bibles, a Christian study Bible will point some of these things and say this is this, this is that. First of all, I'm not going to debate your theology, nor am I going to try to convince you to drop your theology. That's not my job. I see my role as a teacher in saying, what did it mean in context? Now, what do you do with it from there? Look, the Dead Sea Scrolls are full of this. They called them pesharim. They would read a text and they would say,
Little fragments. Here and there.
that, like a popular phrase in the pesharim, the interpretations would be, this is the Romans. You know, they would read the Kettim. It says the Kettim. Who are the Kettim? And the Mark Lloyd of the day goes, it's clearly the Romans. Well, how do you say that? Well, look what the Romans are doing. It fits the text. It's in context. Read it. You're like, but it doesn't say Romans, Mark. Yeah, but it's the... See, those kind of things were happening 150 BCE. They were probably happening 450 BCE, 750 BCE.
Pretty
You
much.
see? What we have to do to find our way out of this is put the edges to the puzzle first, put them together, and fill it in with what we know. What we know. Don't speculate. Don't mash the pieces together when they don't fit. Go with it as it goes.
Get some spray paint out and change the colors.
Yeah, yeah.
A blank.
You ever do
Blank
what do they call Rubik's Cube?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God, yeah.
Peel them little things off.
Yeah, you ever get to the point where you're so frustrated you just want to peel the stickers off and put them in the right place? I don't want
Actually,
to
you
force
can
it.
break it apart and put it back
Yeah.
together.
So there's a way to work that out. I'm not
That's
good
well.
at that. I'm just using it as an example.
Stickers,
Hey, look.
that takes too long.
Spray paint.
It's always fun. I love sharing the biblical message. I look forward to doing it again next week. If you benefited from today's class to help clarify, help me share it around. I mean, that's all I'm asking. What I want out of this is for people to have an understanding, a proper understanding of the biblical text. So share it. I mean, that's all we're asking.
And Mark, next time we need to, you need to slow down your little conversation here. We gotta
I'm gonna
get,
try.
can you get a word in?
I'm gonna
Can
try.
you get a word in, Mark?
I like to talk.
That's right. When he does, everybody better shut up,
That's
though. I'm
right.
telling you, I've been around him a long time. In fact, Mark's one of the ones that got me into this whole mess
It's his
here.
fault. It's his fault.
That's right. He and Dennis.
Right.
Hey, look, one other thing before we go. If you hadn't made plans to come to Sukkot here for the weekend, we're just doing a weekend. We're not doing the full camp out here. We couldn't arrange all that. But we do have a conference that final weekend of Sukkot, October 18 to 20. We're going to rent a big tent. We're going to have it out here. I want people to come, and we've got 2 hotels. There are other places locally that people can stay. But
You got
anyway,
the itinerary you're putting out in the next bullet. right?
yeah, very close. We yesterday, John and Sherry and I penciled in the program for the weekend, 18, 19, and 20, and we're looking forward to sharing that. I'm going to type it up, send it to the board as soon as I get their check off on it, because there are other people who help me make that kind of call. We'll put that out to the public. So within the next 2 weeks, there'll be a full-blown itinerary. It's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting, and a great time of fellowship.
Full moon or something too.
Yeah.
What's
No,
that?
that
Be a
was
full
last
moon.
night. Last night.
Well, we're talking a month
Yeah,
away.
a month from now, yeah.
That's true. Yeah, usually
Sukkot.
Sukkot is a full
Well,
moon.
That's
Bring,
right.
bring your wolf bane and your garlic.
That's right.
Part of the system there.
Look, it's always fun to come together and study
Yes, it
Scripture. If you can join us face to face, it's probably even more fun that way. And we look forward to it. We've got meals. We're designing everything. We're going to make it good. So if you can make it, make it. Have a beautiful week. Stay tuned for Jono and I to announce our Kingdom Chronicles go date. As I understand it, we are going to record Thursday, and then Jono will put that together and put it out the following next few days after that. Jono is going to do that piece of it, and then we're going to work together. I really am excited about this. It's called The Kingdom Chronicles. It'd be better than anything you've ever watched on Netflix. You'll probably stop all other activities when this comes out.
Man.
So now you can't binge it because we only do one a week. So Unless you just want to wait
You're not gonna
until.
Save 'em all
archive
up?
'em? Yeah,
Yeah.
archive
Some
them.
people were asking if it's gonna be live streamed or not, so I know y'all have y'all's own.
We're not gonna do it live. That's a
Right,
good
right,
question.
right.
We're gonna record together. Jono and I are kind of rough around the edges.
right.
We get to fighting in a good way. We're good friends, but so in fact, what made us start talking about this, by the way, is after a real good, healthy debate one night, we jokingly said, "Man, we ought to put this
Yeah,
up online.
yeah.
People will love this." But anyway, we really started talking about doing a biblical program together. What we would prefer to do is, it's not scripted. Like, in other words, we have an idea what we're going to talk about, and both of us come and start
talk show.
talking. It's a talk show. It's a study, an in-depth study, but then we'll put that together and make it nice, 45 minutes.
He takes the information and kind of cleans it up a little
Yeah,
bit.
and he has to do a little bit of that, to make it really fit into 45 minutes.
Well, it'd be
Actually,
quicker if
they
you guys
clearly
were in the
polishes
same
it a little
continent,
bit.
It would be. And I mean, like when I do it, it's usually 9, 10 o'clock at night, my time,
So-
because they're 15 hours
So
ahead.
even after you do a program, you could actually take your program and put it on your website and stuff.
Yeah,
In other
yeah,
words,
yeah.
so it won't be live streamed per se, but it might be available.
Yeah,
It
but the
will
finished
be.
product will be so much.
Call
nicer.
it
Sure.
on demand.
Program.
On demand.
There you
And so,
go.
in other words, this will be a on demand podcast, and you'll be able to download it. It's going to be housed on Jono's site, Truth to You.
Yeah.
He's got that's what he does. He's a show host, basically. He's really a good interviewer. He does those kind of things. If you hadn't checked it out, go to truthtouYou.org.
But you're gonna make all those links available. So
Yep,
people
and
will
we'll
be able to
share them
see.
on United
I
Israel
think
as
some
well.
people are just concerned they're not gonna be able to find it.
Oh yeah, you'll be able to
Yeah,
find it.
yeah, they'll be able to find it.
Absolutely. So anyway, have a beautiful weekend, and we look forward to seeing you again next week, Saturday morning, 10:30 a.m. Central Standard Time, right here, Facebook, YouTube. Share the class if you liked it. Shabbat
Yeah.
Shalom, Shavua Tov.
Good time, y'all.
Bye.